The Jeffrey Epstein case represents one of the most complex and disturbing chapters in modern legal history. For decades, a high society financier operated a systematic enterprise of sexual exploitation that reached into the highest echelons of global power. Today, as millions of pages of documents are finally being declassified under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the public is gaining an unprecedented look at how this network functioned. This is not just a story of individual crimes. It is an examination of how wealth and influence can be weaponized to create a shield of near-total impunity. To understand the gravity of these revelations, we must look at the facts of the operation, the high-powered names involved, and the systemic failures that allowed this to continue for so long. The mechanics of exploitation, Jeffrey Epstein's operation, was not a random series of incidents. It was a calculated, industrial-scale system designed to recruit and control vulnerable young women and girls. Investigations have confirmed that Epstein and his longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, utilized a pyramid recruitment strategy. Victims were often initially lured with the promise of professional opportunities or paid massages. That would take place at Epstein's various properties, including his Manhattan mansion, his Palm Beach estate, and his private island, Little St. James. Once inside his orbit, these young women were often pressured into recruiting others. Epstein would pay recruiters hundreds of dollars in cash for every new girl they brought into the system. This created a self-sustaining cycle of abuse. Survivors have described a chilling environment where their movements were monitored, their identities were stripped away, and they were treated as commodities. The term sex slave is frequently used by victims to describe the level of total control Epstein exerted over their lives. High-powered names and global connections, the most explosive aspect of the case, has always been the list of prominent individuals who socialized with Epstein. It is important to distinguish between those who simply knew him and those who are specifically accused of wrongdoing in court documents. The recently unsealed records mention figures from across the political and social spectrum, illustrating how Epstein carefully curated a network of untouchable associates. Prince Andrew Britain, perhaps the most high-profile figure linked to the case, the former Duke of York was a frequent guest at Epstein's properties. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, alleged she was trafficked to the prince for sexual encounters when she was 17. While the prince has consistently denied these allegations, he reached a multi-million-dollar settlement with Giuffre in 2022. Recent 2026 document releases include emails where Epstein offered to introduce the prince to various women, further complicating his public defense. Bill Clinton, the former president's name appears frequently in the files. While witnesses like Johanna S. Joberg have testified about Epstein's claims regarding Clinton's preferences, there have been no formal accusations of illegal conduct by Clinton in these documents. His representatives have maintained that he traveled on Epstein's plane for philanthropic work, but was unaware of Epstein's crimes. Donald Trump, the former president, was a social acquaintance of Epstein's in the 1990s and early 2000s. While some uncorroborated claims have surfaced in recent DOJ releases, investigators have noted that many of these were submitted without evidence. Trump has stated he had a falling out with Epstein in the mid-2000s and was not a fan. Bill Gates and Elon Musk. These names have appeared in recent tranches of emails, often involving Epstein's attempts to secure funding or business partnerships. For instance, emails suggest Epstein tried to leverage knowledge of an extramarital affair to pressure Gates. Both men have distanced themselves, with Gates calling his meetings with Epstein a huge mistake. The common thread among these names is the halo effect they provided. By surrounding himself with world leaders, Nobel laureates, and billionaires, Epstein made himself seem legitimate, making it harder for victims to be heard when they tried to speak out. The shadow of intelligence and finance. One of the most persistent questions in the Epstein case is, where did the money come from? Epstein's wealth was estimated in the hundreds of millions, yet he had few traditional clients. Investigative leads in 2026 have pointed toward deeper, more shadowy connections. Internal DEA memos from 2015, recently made public, suggest Epstein was the target of an investigation named Operation Chain Reaction. This probe looked into suspicious wire transfers and potential ties to drug trafficking and international money laundering. Furthermore, some associates have alleged that Epstein had ties to various intelligence agencies, using his social network to gather information or compromise on powerful people. While the FBI has stated they found no conclusive evidence of a formal blackmail ring, the sheer volume of surveillance equipment found in Epstein's homes, including hidden cameras in guest rooms, continues to fuel these concerns. The failure of the justice system, the most damning part of the Epstein saga, is the 2008 Non-Prosecution Agreement, NPA, orchestrated by then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta. Despite the FBI having evidence of dozens of victims, the deal allowed Epstein to plead guilty to minor state charges of soliciting a prostitute. He served only 13 months in a private wing of a county jail, with work release privileges that allowed him to go to his office for 12 hours a day. This deal effectively silenced the victims and granted immunity to any potential co-conspirators. It took a massive investigative effort by the Miami Herald in 2018 to bring these facts back to light, leading to Epstein's federal arrest in 2019. His subsequent death in a New York jail cell, officially ruled a suicide, prevented a full trial that would have aired the evidence in open court. The 2026 transparency revelations, as of early 2026, the Department of Justice has released over 3.5 million pages of evidence. These documents include thousands of videos and nearly 200,000 images. While many names are still redacted to protect the privacy of the victims, the sheer scale of the enterprise is now undeniable. UN experts have recently stated that the evidence suggests a global criminal enterprise that may meet the legal threshold for crimes against humanity. The push for transparency is not about politics, it is about accountability. It is about understanding how a predator could operate in plain sight for 30 years. It is about ensuring that no one, regardless of their net worth or political standing, is above the law. The victims, many of whom are now adults still struggling with the trauma of their youth, deserve a complete and honest accounting of the truth. This case serves as a stark reminder that power without oversight is a recipe for tragedy. As we continue to sift through the data and the testimonies, we must remain focused on the facts. The Jeffrey Epstein case is a mirror held up to society, forcing us to look at the dark corners of the world's elite and ask, how do we make sure this never happens again? Shadows of power. The D's Operation Chain Reaction, the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files under the 2025 Epstein Files Transparency Act, has unveiled a previously hidden layer of federal interest in his activities. While the world focused on the 2008 sweetheart deal in Florida, a high-stakes federal investigation was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. This probe, known as Operation Chain Reaction, was spearheaded by the Drug Enforcement Administration, D, and targeted a massive transnational network that went far beyond the scope of local solicitation charges. By examining the newly unclassified 69-page memo from 2015, we can now see the true scale of the financial and criminal web Epstein had woven across the globe. A multi-agency sting, 2010-2015 Operation Chain Reaction, was officially opened on December 17, 2010, in New York. Unlike smaller investigations, this was an octet of organized crime drug enforcement task forces, Operation. This designation is reserved for the most significant transnational criminal organizations that represent a threat to the safety and economy of the United States. The DEA did not just look at Epstein. They identified 14 other co-conspirators involved in a complex web of illegitimate wire transfers, tied to both illicit drug activities and prostitution. The investigation centered on two primary hubs, New York City and the U.S. Virgin Islands. It utilized a fusion center in Virginia to coordinate data from the Treasury Department, the FBI, and international law enforcement. The goal was to dismantle a cross-border conspiracy that utilized the American financial system to fund a lifestyle of exploitation. For 5 years, federal agents tracked border crossings, monitored bank accounts, and compiled a trove of information that suggested Epstein's criminal enterprise was systematic, widespread, and professionally managed. The $1.5 billion trail the most staggering revelations from the 2026 document releases involve the sheer volume of money moving through Epstein's accounts. Senate investigators have now confirmed that between 2003 and 2019, Epstein moved more than $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions across major global banks. J.P. Morgan Chase, the bank processed over $1 billion for Epstein. Despite internal warnings from compliance officers as early as 2006, senior executives repeatedly overrode red flags to keep him as a client. It was only after his 2019 death that the bank filed retroactive reports on thousands of suspicious transactions. Bank of New York Mellon, BNY. Recently unsealed records show $378 million moved through BNY accounts via 270 separate wire transfers. Investigators found no legitimate business purpose for these movements, which often exhibited patterns typical of money laundering. Deutsche Bank. Hundreds of millions more flowed through this institution, often involving Russian correspondent bank accounts. These transfers frequently correlated with the physical movement of women and girls across international borders. This wall of cash served as the fuel for Epstein's operation. It allowed him to buy silence, pay off recruiters, and maintain a fleet of private aircraft and luxury properties that acted as the infrastructure for his crimes. The Russian connection and international reach Operation Chain Reaction also delved into Epstein's ties to Eastern Europe. The DEA memos suggest that Epstein utilized sanctioned Russian financial institutions to process payments associated with trafficking activities in Russia and surrounding regions. This international dimension highlights why the DEA, an agency typically focused on narcotics, was so deeply involved. The drug nexus required to open such a case suggests that investigators believed Epstein's network was either facilitating the movement of illicit substances or using similar laundering channels as major drug cartels. The sudden halt, unanswered questions despite the ample evidence of a cross-border criminal conspiracy, Operation Chain Reaction never resulted in federal drug trafficking or money laundering charges during its active years. The 2015 memo was marked judicial pending, indicating it was a live, significant investigation. However, the probe seemingly stalled or was suppressed before reaching a grand jury. Senate Finance Committee members are currently questioning why the investigation was not pursued to its logical conclusion. The 2026 releases show that many names of the 14 co-conspirators remain heavily redacted, despite the Transparency Act's mandate to unmask non-victim participants. This has led to intense legislative pressure on the Department of Justice to explain whether political influence or intelligence assets were used to shield members of the network from prosecution. The path to accountability, the facts revealed by Operation Chain Reaction, changed the narrative of the Epstein case. It was never just about one man's depravity. It was a high-level financial and logistical operation that involved major global banks and touched multiple continents. As of March 2026, the investigation has shifted from a historical inquiry into an active pursuit of those who enabled this global criminal enterprise. UN human rights experts have noted that the systematic nature of these crimes, including sexual slavery and torture, may meet the legal threshold for crimes against humanity. This would mean that statutes of limitations might be lifted, allowing for the prosecution of enablers and co-conspirators decades after the facts. The truth is no longer hidden in the shadows of law enforcement sensitive memos. It is being laid bare for the world to see. Please feel free to follow, subscribe, comment, like, and share. This helps you to stay connected to me, and it helps me to remain here creating more content for you. Thank you, love always, Maria DC Santiago.